Hi, everyone. Again, thanks for your time. I like to say I'm not from the industry, and as I get older, it starts becoming a bit of a hollow threat. But I've only been involved with market research for the last 5 years, and so I still think I have a relative outsider's perspective on the industry. In the spirit of full disclosure, I'm not an AI expert either, although, again, looking at the application of that has been something I've been very interested in as it pertains to market research. So just to give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover, I want to spend a little bit of time on the terminology that gets used, because lots of terms get used interchangeably, and I think they're sometimes different, and it's important to understand those differences. Again, from an outsider's perspective, I want to look at how I see value being derived from market research, quickly look over where efficiencies can be gained, and then how those efficiencies can change the way that industry interacts with market research. Then we're going to look a little bit more exploratory at how far we can go within automated research and within automation in general, and then looking at the role of the researcher, which is a topic that's now becoming familiar on this webcast, certainly. Albert Einstein once said, any fool can know, the point is to understand. And for me, that is pretty fundamental when we talk about automation. I think the difference between automating the production of a number and automating to the extent where someone without training can understand what the meaning of that number is really important. And so when I talk about automation, for us, the goal is always automation that includes a level of automation around understanding. And to give you a very simple example, for me, this is the difference between knowing, for example, that the persuasion score on my advert is 3.03 and understanding that this particular ad is unlikely to change people's behavior. So that's the difference. So just look at some of the terminology. AI first attributed to Alan Turing in 1947. He talked about intelligent machines, and most people are aware of the Turing test, where a computer can fool a human into thinking that they are human, they're dealing with a human. Machine learning is the buzzword that we hear all the time at the moment, and machine learning has its roots in an algorithm that was developed by a chap by the name of Arthur Samuel in 1952. He set out to write a computer program that allowed the computer to play checkers, which is drafts to those of us in the UK. And his approach was different in that rather than try to think himself of how to write a computer program that could win a game of drafts, he showed the computer loads of different drafts boards and then entered into the computer whether each of those draft boards resulted in a successful winning the game or not. Showed thousands of board layouts to the computer, said in each case did that board layout result in a win or a loss, and then he used this statistical technique to essentially maximize the likelihood of success from each of those different draft layouts, and then simply told the computer which moves were acceptable between the current draft board layout and success. And essentially, through the computer seeing many human draft boards being played, and actually the computer playing a version of itself and seeing which draft boards resulted in success, the machine eventually became a better and better draft player, to the point where it was a decent amateur draft player. Expert systems, which is where I really want to focus here, is a different technique where the thought process of a human, typically through an if-else based tree, is implemented in a computer so that the thought process of that human can be replicated in an automated way. And that's the area of AI that I think is most interesting in the current environment in market research. So where do automation systems and expert systems impact market research? I like to use this curve, which again comes from an outsider, to explain what I see as being both the real value add of the industry and also some of the problems. Just to describe the axes on the vertical axis, we've got value, and I make the assumption that where value is derived or is created for a client, we have a right to make a profit. On the horizontal axis, we've got time, and within traditional market research, I think no one would disagree, that's measured in weeks. I think having absorbed some of the things the industry does, it's amazing how much R&D goes into understanding human behavior, understanding how to get how to ask the right questions, so that you can, as succinctly as possible, capture a person's likely behavior. So methodology design and the algorithms that you use to generate understandable insight from that are really important. Obviously, the actual data that is gathered is very valuable. You're asking the respondent for their time. Typically, you're paying them money for that. You're getting back data that has been the questions for which have been very carefully designed, and it is very clean data as opposed to something like a social media feed. But then we enter into the process for consuming that data, and it is slow, manual, and typically involves the kinds of human errors that humans introduce in a manual process. One of the ones that I find most interesting is the actual analysis process, where people look at crosstabs of data to find things that they consider to be interesting based on their experience of looking at other crosstabs of other data sets. At the end of the process, you have the insights that you're ready to deliver to the client, and the value starts to be created again. People understand the methodologies, they understand the research they've done, and they can help the client to implement the results of a piece of research. But what seems to be the case is that often at that point, budgets are strained, time frames are tight, and so not enough time can be spent on those value-creating steps at the end, the consulting, the description of what the research means, and importantly, helping the client to understand how to implement that with the potential for follow-up projects, further research, etc. So what does this look like within an automated workflow? We certainly at Zappi aim to automate the entire data gathering process, and as I said at the beginning, part of the headline insights, the understanding behind what the data means, to create space for those next steps. And typically this is done in hours as opposed to weeks. So which are the processes that can be automated? As Melanie was describing, the survey design is very important. Capturing the right people is very important, and so things like calculating the cost of getting at a particular target group, that is automated. The data collection process is automated in its entirety. Then modeling that data to help to reach conclusions based off things like one-number scores, and the tabulation is automated. Importantly, the statistical analysis that can be applied to enrich the story needs to be baked into the automation system so that you don't break that automated pipeline. And then finally, a picture tells 1,000 words, so giving the right kind of visualization off the back of the process is again important, and that is something that has been automated. So what does this do? If you shrink weeks to hours, a lot of partners on Zappi Store start with the concern that this will cannibalize their existing business. But what we have found is typically clients spend the same amount on research, sometimes they spend more, but what they do is test many, many more times. So they test rather than once for just before launch of a creative. They will test the idea, they'll test the storyboard, they'll test the animatic, and they'll test through the editing process. So I think it's safe to say that this kind of automation is not unique to the market research industry. And I've got a couple of little factoids to make that point. More people signed up for Harvard online university courses last year than have ever been to the university in person. 3 times as many disagreements are resolved between eBay traders each year using entirely automated online dispute resolution than there are lawsuits filed in the entire US court system. And familiar to most people, the impact on the medical profession, WebMD, which is a collection of medical websites, has more unique visitors each month than all the doctors in the United States have in a year. And in the UK, we now have a new number to dial from the NHS, which is 111, which is triaged by junior nurses sitting in front of an expert system, with that system only pointing to the need for a doctor to get involved under certain circumstances. Within the market research industry, a specific example, which comes from a study done on Zappy it's important to make the point that no person has been involved with the production of this report. The person inputs aspects of the problem that they're trying to assess, so their competitor list, the category they're operating in, etc. And from that, and who they want to talk to, and then from that process gets this report entirely automated. And just to take the time to read what it says, most of Apple's current market share is deemed to be what we call steady share. By this we mean it's supported by the commitment that people have to Apple. In addition, the proportion of Apple's market share that's at risk is greater than the potential new share that can be won. The net effect of all these factors suggests that Apple's core strategy needs to be defensive. Note, by defensive we don't mean negative. In fact, the best defensive strategies are often highly aggressive. So, as you can see, it's highly opinionated, and this is the strength of an expert system. The opinion that is overlaid on this particular data comes from the person who designed the conversion model in the first case, Jan Hofmeier. So, how far can we go, and what's left for researchers themselves? There's a really interesting book by Richard and Daniel Susskind in which they explore the fundamental question of how do we share expertise in society. And they contrast what they refer to as the print-based industrial society, which is what we live in now, and looking back the last 20 years or so, where professions play the role of the custodians of fields of expertise, and the channels through which the common man like myself gets access to this expertise. They contrast that with what they call the technology-based internet society, and they predict that increasingly machines either operating on their own, or as in the case of NHS 111 with non-specialist users, will take on much of the tasks that are currently the preserve of the professions. A really interesting article in The Economist entitled "March of the Machines" quotes experts who say things like the substitution of machinery for human labor will render the population redundant. They worry that the discovery of this mighty power has come before we know how to rightly deploy it. And then they go on to take, let the cat out of the bag by saying these are actually quotes taken from commentators on the invention of steam 200 years ago. So neither Susskind nor The Economist actually aim to answer the question what's left for us, and I'm afraid I'm not going to try to do that either, other than to say that it seems to me that there is right now a lot of opportunity to take advantage of that process automation, as Melanie said, to focus on the kinds of things that humans still do a lot better. The R&D, how to ask better questions, how to make better use of the data that we do get, and importantly, how to help the clients make better use of that same data. So thanks very much. I'll open the floor for questions.